Everybody was writing books about the left in Latin America from Europe. I've read them all, I think, most of them. And everybody was saying, with a very European high ground, what the problems were with us, that we didn't get it right. We didn't think about this or that. Doesn't mean to say that what we do is perfect, it isn't. My problem with that was nobody was paying attention to the right. So we decided to organize a panel at a conference, and it was at my instigation, in that sense I'm responsible, that we should look at the right wing. And we produced this book, and what we discovered was amazing. First, the right in Latin America is not democratic. It wasn't 7 years ago, never has been. And it's definitely not doing anything to change those credentials at all. So, the difficulty with that is one of perception. Journalists in the UK and in Europe in general present the right wing that are opposing regimes such as in Ecuador, or governments such as in Ecuador, Venezuela, and so on, Argentina, as beleaguered democrats, people who are fighting a very desperate battle against this authoritarianism, stripping up and so on. And that's what they do. So the question is, I think it seems to me, is to go a bit further than that. This is, what I'm going to do is to engage in some reflections, because I think the panorama in Latin America has changed so much. It's just incredible how much has changed. It's been around a long time. And in 1961, the Organization of American States expelled Cuba from its ranks. And Latin America has just established an organization called the Commonwealth of Latin American and Caribbean States that specifically and purposefully excludes the United States and Canada from it. And it just now, 3 days ago, 5 days ago, a week ago, that the Latin Americans as a whole decided by unanimity to give the precedence of CELAC, this new organization, to Cuba. So it's a full change, and I never thought I was going to live to see this in the whole region. So the changes are absolutely gigantic. I don't think we have absorbed them completely yet. However, there is one player in the world that has absorbed the significance of this better than anybody else, and that is the United States. The United States has the capabilities, technically speaking, militarily of course, and in terms of resources, to do a lot of damage. The difficulty is that they don't have the politics. What I mean is they're not able to persuade significant sections of the populations in our countries as they used to be. You know, almost nobody believes in the American way of life anymore. I think the only people that do are some few desperate Cubans who want the visa to go to the United States, but nobody else, not even in the United States, believe there is such a thing as the American way of life, because this is that. The whole thing is very much in crisis. And they have a very impressive array of organizations with which they attack what we're trying to do. And definitely Ecuador is one of those countries that is on, you know, at the moment is a target. It's not the only one, all the others are. What you have is the bodies such as the National Endowment for Democracy that channels millions and millions and millions of dollars to all sorts of bodies, political parties, television channels, newspapers, and so on, that in other words, it's got the capacity to organize, finance, and if you give the money, you tell people what to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't. And certainly the United States specializes in telling people what to do, and if you don't, then usually you are in trouble. I'm Chilean, so I know what I'm talking about. This is the National Endowment for Democracy is being organized in such a way that actually is not directly accountable to the presidency. It is accountable to Congress. So therefore, Congress, through various committees, which I'm going to come on to, is able to actually decide quite significantly the policy, the foreign policy of the United States regarding specific governments in the region, regarding specific processes that are going on there. And it is very effective. It is everywhere. It is quite powerful, and it can do, I insist, a great deal of damage. They also have, of course, the legendary CIA, that if anybody watched the documentaries that they were shown some time ago after the collapse of the USSR, I think they got too confident, they told too much. It was incredible. When I watched those things, it was much worse than I ever imagined myself. But they have also other bodies which are private. They have the International Republican Institute, which is chaired by John McCain, not our friend, certainly not. And then you have the National Democratic Institute, which is an equivalent to the International Republican Institute, which is a specialized institute of the Republican Party, to do exactly the same, to channel resources, to influence people, to organize them in order to engage in plans and programs of destabilization. And the National Democratic Institute is the equivalent for the Democratic Party in the United States of the IRI. And it's chaired by Madeleine Albright, who is not a friend of ours either, and is not a friend of many other governments around the place. And what you have is, when you read, for example, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and these sort of newspapers, sometimes one has the mistaken notion that what they write is aimed at the general public. It ain't. It isn't. I don't think they care. The public in the United States is extremely depoliticized, and they count for very little, unfortunately. They aim at the MPs and Congress people and the senators. That's what they aim at. And every time there is a massive whip-up by these newspapers and various television channels in order to ensure that the right framework and the right spirit, if you see my meaning, exists, so that these committees actually are compelled and take the wrong decisions, particularly the wrong decisions regarding anything to do with us. And here you have the Foreign Affairs Committee of the US Congress and the Foreign Affairs Committee of the US Senate. They're absolutely crucial. And as a result of the elections several years ago, the extreme right wing of the Republican Party were able to capture some of these key committees. Somebody like, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who is an extreme anti-Cuban Miami, I was going to say fascist, but I won't. Really, really extreme. I mean, she's somebody who publicly, on television, called on the assassination of Fidel Castro. He just did it. She's a person in the Congress. So it's these committees actually which are the problem. And the mechanisms to disorganize, complicate, destabilize, even assassinations, coup d'etat, everything that it is in their book, is organized through very, very, very capable cadre that they have in the State Department. We've been trying to study this. It's quite difficult to get serious information from these bodies, but some you can get. And if you look at the undersecretaryship, I think that's the word, excuse me if I invented a new word in English, that deals with hemispheric affairs, that is to say the Western Hemisphere, Latin America. You have Obama, you have Hillary, now you're going to have John Kerry, and then you have all the others below them, like Roberto Jefferson, who is the public face of it. Well, reasonable to some extent. Everybody else below them are absolutely horrible cold warriors. Many, many of them actually go back to the 1980s. The people who actually organized the assassination of hundreds of thousands of our people. So it seems to me that that is what we're facing. I'm aware of it tonight. I finished the time now. So the situation is one where these forces cannot produce coalition majorities in our countries because of what is being done. What is being done is so attractive, it benefits so many people all the time, that it is very, very difficult, unless we make mistakes, which is possible, very, very difficult for right-wing forces to be able to organize coalitions through which they get electoral majorities. You know, Venezuela is a case in point, but it's increasingly the case in other places. Therefore, the non-democratic view or way is the one that they're going to try to do us. So this is the context. And therefore, we have to be extremely vigilant in two senses. Every time there is an election in one of our countries, then the media gets immediately very active. And the purpose is to isolate and demonize. And there is a huge amount of public opinion in this country that is quite gullible to believe what they write in decent newspapers such as The Guardian, that specializes in demonizing some of what we do over there. So in that sense, it seems to me we have to be very, very careful. But I want to make a final point. I want to end with a positive note, apart from these warnings. The transformation, I insist, in Latin America are absolutely gigantic. In 1990, the level of poverty in Latin America, according to the Economic Commission for Latin America, was 48%. At the end of 2011, the same Economic Commission produced a report, and the level of poverty was 30%. Between 1990 and then last 1 year ago, more than 100 million people have been taken out of poverty in Latin America, which is very impressive. Any place that is able to do that, you know, through democracy, through empowerment, through inclusion, and everything that we know, is just fantastic. They are refounding the nation. They are refounding the nation in such a way that everybody can be part of it. And in that sense, it's very fantastic. So our tasks are this. The more they succeed, and the more the friends and comrades, if I can call them that, in Ecuador succeed, the easier it is for us to fight this nonsense that is going on in Europe, which is so horrible and so detrimental. So, viva la revolución ciudadana. Long live the citizenship.
Social and economic progress that the Korea government's achieved in the last 5 years, but of the contrast it offers to the same 5-year period here in Europe, and also of the real risk of US intervention that the Korea government suffers at the moment. I'm not sure it's important messages. So I do apologize to keep our speakers to time. I'm sure we could have all heard them speak for a lot longer if it wasn't so cold. But it does mean we do have time for a brief question and answer session, so I'll take one round of questions for the panel. A lot of hands went up very quickly. Okay, I'll take the first 4 hands that I saw, and then we'll come to a second round if we do have time. So I'll take those first and go to the panel. This lady here, if you could speak quite loudly.
Could someone on the panel speak about rights and nature provisions in 2008? I was reading the Forest when I read about this as a response to climate change. I know this project was developed by Bolivia with the champion of the Universal Declaration of Rights on Earth. I'll go into that.
Perfect, thank you. I saw that Alistair.
Yes, well, I just wanted first to congratulate everyone on the panel and all the organisers of this meeting, because I think it's extremely important that we begin to address the question of the importance of the citizen revolution in Ecuador and to combat the media campaign. That's the other point that I want to stress. Just to reinforce what Francisco was saying, the Guardian, not coincidental, on Saturday last, the Guardian had 2 long articles, or one long interview and comment article sandwich. And without any doubt, over the next few days, they will find a way of questioning the massive victory which I'm sure Ecuador will win. And we have to be ready to deal with it.
And let's go on and directly on.
Hi, it was actually quite a similar question to the first one. I mean, it's really inspirational we can hear about the social progress and the politics of Ecuador. I think it's especially just important to look at the steps that we've taken on sustainable development and climate change when it's such, as the panel says, they're still very poor in nature and also one that's not really historically responsible for climate change. So I'm going to say a bit more about some of the progressive policies to combat climate change and environmental degradation that are happening.
Thank you, Alice. Also, finally, this round is gentleman.
I'm going to be from the Cuban Solidarity Campaign. I just want to echo what it says, the 2 points that Francisco made. One is, I think, the extremely optimistic scenario developing in Latin America, not only in the individual specific countries, in terms of the changes that are taking place there, but the relationships between those countries, establishing fundamentally different social, economic and political relationships. Contrast, for example, the relationships between the countries of ALBA, Venezuela and Cuba, for example, in terms of exchanging oil for paramedics, in terms of exchanging teachers and so on, and those kind of things. Contrast that with the way in which Europe has intervened in Greece to tell the Greek people how their economy should be run. It's a fundamentally different situation. I think that's a reason to be extremely optimistic. On the cautious side, and I think it is important just to say this, if you want to know what intervention is like, or potentially, in terms of Ecuador, you have to look at the history of Cuba over the last 50 years, which has suffered every single kind of possible intervention, from direct overt intervention in the Bay of Pigs to the covert interventions that are going on to this day with terrorism and so forth. And I think it's a tribute to the countries of Latin America that they've recognized the independence of Cuba and its relationships and status that is acquired. This has, as Francisco said, been made the president of the Committee of States of Latin America and the Caribbean for the coming year. And I think that's an expression of the independence and the self-determination, not only of the specific countries that we're talking about, but as the continent as a whole. And that's extremely positive, I think, for everybody across the world.
Would anyone else like to take the issue of the environment? Yep.
Thank you very much for that question. Rights of nature. You're right, the Constitution of 2008 specifically underlines the fact that nature is also a subject of rights, and this is absolutely a revolutionary idea. It's such a revolutionary idea that we still have to find out what that means. That was why at the beginning of my intervention I tried to underpin the fact that both development and climate change have to be dealt in a way where both things are carried on, right? When we talk about rights of nature in Ecuador, we like to frame it in what we call the summa causa in Quechua. That is, if we make a translation, summa causa means something like good living, right? Both Ecuador and Bolivia have developed this concept over these last years. Very similar, in fact, it has the same origin. It's in Quechua, it's the same terminology. In fact. This summa causa, what it tries to develop is a balance between human needs and our main planet. I mean, on the planet, our main, as a journalist in Venezuela used to say, our only spaceship, right? That is the planet. I mean, contradictions exist, as I said before. It's quite difficult to, as we put it, to sit on a golden mine when you're poor. That means that resources, as we put it, have to be used for development. That doesn't mean that resources have to be exploited in a way where it's just not sustainable. I mean, this is, in a lot of ways, this is not ideological. It's common sense, right? Environment has to be taken care of. The planet is our mother, as we like to put it in our cosmogony. And that means that we have to respect that, because by respecting that, we are also respecting us and our people. But this doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice our development because certain, I don't want to be insulting for European ones, right? But, you know, this myth of the Amazon and the Greenland and all this kind of stuff. It's not a myth. I mean, it exists, and it gives us our air, the air that we breathe. As you know, 70% of the air in the planet is from the Amazon. But as I say, we have to understand that our necessities are dramatic, have to be covered. Our people cannot live in poverty. They have the right also to education, they have the right to healthcare, and that needs resources. But at the same time, we are trying to find our way to cope with both things, trying to establish new standards for exploitation of oil, of mining, etc. Of course, as I said, that doesn't mean that we have found the definite magic formula. That is not the case. At the same time, we are not saying that Ecuador or the summa causa concept should be the new beacon and that all the world should focus on that new concept. What we're saying is that we're trying this path. It's a modest one. It is not, it does have contradictions, as I said. We're trying to do our best in solving those contradictions. And we would like that the world learns from that, not to copy the model, because it's the Ecuadorian model, it's what we are trying to put on, but at least the philosophy, right? To understand that both things have to be balanced, and that the only way for sustainable development is effectively to make sure that we don't end up killing the environment.
Yeah. I think Latin America suffered from integrationitis. There's no question about that. The number of instances and initiatives are so many, it's just very difficult to keep up with it. The number of multilateral, bilateral agreements that are signed literally every week are just extraordinary. And I was very pleasantly surprised when in the last meeting of CELAC that brought the Europeans to talk to them, which is very impressive, to see Angela Merkel, sort of shaking hands with some of these demons in the region. It's quite nice to see. And the Europeans came to sort of listen and how do you... The underlying question was, how do you manage to grow economically? We can't. That's I thought that was the tone it sounded good. There were several interesting agreements, however, between the European Union and Latin America. And in the final document, what is known as the Declaración de Santiago, the Santiago Declaration, which is the statement of CELAC, is recognized the role, the significance of all the instances of regional integration. And I was pleasantly surprised to see Albania. So in that sense, it's you know, the Latin Americans are very pragmatically looking at everything that moves in the right direction and putting together. Alba, however, is special in the following sense. I don't have too much time, so I have to be rather cryptic, but it's based on the idea of countries' solidarity with each other. That is to say, you share what you have with others, and then you're trying to make sure that the others benefit from what you actually got yourself, which is not necessarily oil. It could be, you know, the capacity to teach people, such as the Cubans do. All of this is quite extraordinary. It seems to me that one of the heights of their achievement, which is definitely part more of Alba than of anything else, is Operation Miracle, which involves Cuba and Venezuela in a joint program, identifying people in the region, including the United States, poor, who are blind because they suffer from cataracts or similar eye ailments, who are flown into either Venezuela or Cuba to get operated from their eyes and then get their eyesight restored. And this involves the people who accompany them, which is free of charge. The flights are free of charge, the stay over there is free of charge, the flight back is free of charge, the operation is free of charge. And this was instituted in May 2003, and so far they have conducted 2 million such operations. Why the civilized world can actually be so incapable of doing something which is even smaller than that. And this is the extraordinary thing. So the complication arises, and I'll just enunciate it. The complication arises in the following. When you put together economies which are very different in every possible sense, the number of complications that you have are absolutely ginormous. It's not easy. It's not possible to put people together and then everything is fine. It's not. One example was when they eliminated all the direct barriers to the shoe industry between Argentina and Brazil some years ago. And the market of Argentina was flooded immediately with Brazilian shoes, very cheaply, and nearly, you know, brought to bankruptcy